Okay, so the plan was to compare all of the 10-inch printers on the market, and I will do that later, but right now the big question on many people's lips is, do I get the Elegoo Saturn 4 or do I get the Anycubic Photon M7 Pro? Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm happy to say that neither is a bad choice. They're both good machines and both impressed me, which, if you're a long-time viewer, you'll know is saying something in itself. But yeah, both have surprised me in different ways, and I think knowing the differences to them is the key to making the best choice for yourself. What would I choose? I would choose to have you watch on and make an informed decision. Hi, I'm Ross, and this is FauxHammer Videos. Right, let's rock through the differences, and I'm covering the Saturn 4 Ultra here, not the base Saturn 4. I've already got a separate video comparing the Saturn 4 with the 4 Ultra, and I doubt, since I assume you are watching this, you're considering printers at this price range. You're probably not looking for the more budget-friendly Saturn 4. But if by the end of this, the Saturn 4 Ultra is your pick, check out that comparison video to see what you'd lose in terms of features by saving a bit of money and stepping down to the Saturn 4. And I say features because the print quality is the same on both machines. And that's the same here. Both the Saturn 4 Ultra and the M7 Pro are both capable of the same print quality. You just have to jump through a couple of hoops in order to get that from the M7 Pro. But anyway, let's move on. On the outside, they both have some external features and functional differences worth calling out. Yeah, they look different for one, but I doubt many people would choose a printer based on looks alone. Both printers are about the same size, with the M7 being 310 by 315 by 520 millimeters. The Saturn 4, though, is larger, with 327 by 329 by 548 millimeters. But the Saturn has an fixed up and over lid, which takes up even more space, where the Anycubic has a separate box lid. So one of these is a self-contained unit that you can open one-handed, whilst the other means you have to have spare space in your room to put the lid every time you want to access your prints, or the print plate, or the vat, anything inside the lid. Now, up and over lids may appear limiting to people who rack mount printers due to the extra height and depth you need to open it, but you can easily unscrew the lid and just remove it. Now, staying on the outside, when it comes to connectivity, the Saturn has an external power transformer, whereas the M7 houses this inside the unit. And the sockets are also much neater on the M7, as the power socket is on the back with a mains rocker switch above it. Also on the back of this machine is a connection for the Wi-Fi antenna and an RJ11 socket for the resin pump data cable. That's an extra feature that I'll come back to. The USB socket is on the right side, but it is near the front. The Saturn, however, has all of its sockets along with the Wi-Fi antenna on the right side near the back, which for turning the machine on and off or just inserting the USB drive can be more fiddly. Contrast to this, the Anycubic has a secondary power button on the front, which is a handy addition. Both printers also have a vent hole for extracting fumes out of the printers. You need a separate device for both of these, but the Saturn has a more generic 75mm vent hole, so you can connect up what you want. And because Elegoo have used this same size and screw placement location on most of their printers since the Saturn 2, there are already a ton of models online to let you connect various styles and sizes of hose. Elegoo themselves sell the Mars Mate, but before you buy that, check out my review. The TLDR is I feel that it's better off pumping fumes outside than one pass over a carbon filter and then into your room. The M7 has a more proprietary vent hole, which seems to be made to connect a very specific device that I haven't seen yet, and this is based on the notches inside of this vent hole. So, on to some of the main printer specs. Due to both machines using a different screen, they have marginally different build areas. The M7, which has a 14K screen, has a build area of 223 by 126 millimeters. The Saturn, with its 12K screen, has a smaller area of 219 by 123 millimeters. So that's a difference of 4 millimeters and 3 millimeters. That really isn't much. The larger difference is in the height, where the M7 has an extra centimeter over the Saturn. Now, I know I just talked about the M7 having a 14K screen and the Saturn only having 12K, And that might put some people off when it really shouldn't. If this is the first video of mine you've watched, let me say a couple of things. One, the 12K screens aren't 12K and the 14K screens aren't 14K. For more info on why, please see my 12K printers are irrelevant video, and I'm sorry for the long intro on that one. I was trying to justify every point for every beginner that everyone's ever made. Just watch the first minute, then skip to about 7 minutes in. I'm sorry, please stop telling me this video is too long. I know, I won't do it again. But anyway, the point is, the pixels on both of these screens are rectangular. But let's look at the individual resolutions. On the x-axis, the M7 has 13,320 pixels. The Saturn has 11,520. Now, when rounded up, that's 12,000 and 14,000 respectively, 12K and 14K. But on the y-axis, they both have 5,120. They're exactly the same, though arguably because the 14K screen is larger, the pixels on the y-axis are actually larger too. But that difference is 0.8 microns, it's less than nothing. So what this means is the AVC on these printers is 24 microns for the Saturn, and if you want to split hairs, well, actually, if you want to split an 87th of a hair, because that's the difference we're talking about here, it's 24.8 on the M7. In reality, these printers are both capable of close enough to the exact same print quality that I'm just going to say these are the exact same in terms of print quality. But as I said, the M7 will leave you with some hoops to jump through to get that quality, because out of the box, it's actually noticeably worse for some people. But I'll come back to that after listing the rest of the differing features, because we need to know about several things together in order for me to validate that statement. Both printers have the same style of build plate surface, just with different patterns, and both are really good. I've seen some people already say they've struggled to get parts off these build plates. In response to that, I want to say your base layer exposure time is too high, and that may be because you're printing in an environment which is too cold for the resin. You want it to be at 20 degrees minimum, guys. And both of these printers advertise a feature called auto leveling. Neither of them are true. Auto leveling is when a plate will make itself parallel to the screen and lock itself there. Neither printer does this. The M7 has springs behind the screen, and the Saturn has springs in the build plate. As the plate touches the screen and the springs compress, these two parts become parallel. But as soon as these parts come away from each other, they go back to being just as unlevel as they were before. Now, you shouldn't need to level either printer because they're all done at the factory, but if you do, then the M7 can be done in a very traditional way of loosening the bolts on the neck, getting the plate parallel with the screen and tightening the bolts. On the Saturn, you need to do similar, but instead you adjust the spring tension by turning the 4 inner screws on top of the build plate. But Elegoo really need to make a video explaining to people how to do this properly. One difference in the Elegoo bed is that there are 2 levels to it, the top and the plate, and annoyingly, after each print, the top of the plate is covered in resin, which you then need to wait for it to run off or awkwardly scrape it out, or this resin will drip everywhere when you move the plate to an area to get models off. And that's just wasteful. The Saturn plate clips to the Z-arm with a nice compression latch, and the M7 still uses a big bolt. Both printers have plate pressure detection built into them, which is used to detect obstructions, resin level, and potential print failures. And in both cases, I've seen these features work, and work well. Now, when we look at the vat, this is where some big differences come in. And as a side note, the Anycubic pour spout is awful. The Elegoo spout is a little better because resin will pour out of it rather than down the side of the vat and underneath, but it is a weird shape though. And the Saturn vat comes with PFA release film pre-installed, the M7 uses ACF. And this is where some of you will see some print quality differences because ACF film is frosty, so it diffuses the light from the LCD, which can slightly bloat your prints, and the specks causing the frosting can also create horizontal lines across vertical surfaces. They are small and you can pretty much only see them on tiny models like miniatures or jewelry, but they are there. And a lot of people have said ACF is weaker than PFA and typically will not last as long, but this is because you're pulling the model from it faster, and I just think that even though it's made to be easier to release, it still can't quite hack it as well as we would hope, so it dies a lot quicker when you're printing at maximum possible speeds. because I print small things, I don't like the stuff, so I haven't tested it to the nth degree. Let me know down in the comments if you've got on with this or whether you hate it as I do. But anyway, you can easily swap the M7's ACF film with PFA just as I did, and you need to do this if you want to match the print quality between machines, but this comes with some drawbacks that I'll also come on to. Now, the biggest difference is that each printer works a bit differently. The Anycubic printer has a plate which lowers into the vat, a layer is cured, and then the whole plate is pulled up, which detaches that whole layer from the release film at once. The new Elegoo Ultra series printers now have a tilting vat mechanism, and by tilting the release film away from a layer from the side, the force required to peel the film away from a layer is significantly reduced. Imagine sticking a plunger to something and trying to pull it straight up versus peeling it off from an edge. That's the difference here. And the benefits of reduced pull forces are plentiful. Faster layer release, you can use smaller supports, and I've even stopped seeing little air bubbles on the tops of my prints using this mechanism. Additionally, because the speeds are completely controlled by the printer by just choosing fast or slow mode in the UI, there are fewer settings to worry about, which is great for beginners. But this tilting mechanism does leave a big gap around the screen, it's a pain to clean out if you drip resin in, and it could be fatal if you accidentally pour it in. That's why this printer has a crappy plastic bib for when you remove your build plate. But this mechanism is so fast that I've had multiple printing businesses tell me they've had to change their whole workflow process because these printers finish prints faster than they can typically prepare the next. So this is where we should start to compare speed between the machines. Anycubic has listed a few speeds on their website, from 130mm a second for 100 micron layers for standard resin, and up to 220mm a second with 200 micron layers using high-speed resin. Now, if a company is listing a printer's speed and is only giving you measurements of 100 micron layers, that tells me that these words are designed to do no more than convince you the printer is faster than it actually is. I don't know anyone looking for detailed prints who has a printer at layer heights, because I don't know anyone who has printed with layers higher than 50 microns since I started this channel. In fact, 2 years before that, I got a Photon S, and even then the standard was 50 microns. And in contrast to that, Elegoo have stated 150mm a second max speed, but have neglected to tell us what layer height this was at. So I guess, now I've read that back, that was a long way of telling you that all of these metrics about speed from the brands themselves are absolute bollocks. So look, in reality, both printers are fast. But to get speed from the M7, you need to use the included ACF release film, and remember that's the stuff I talked about earlier which bloats detail, and you need to use fast resins, which are usually crap, low detail, translucent and brittle. But I actually found Anycubic's Fast Resin 2.0 to be a good bit better than the original mix. If, however, you swap the ACF release film for PFA to get the better quality prints, you need to slow the printer down to the same speeds as any other normal printer. The Saturn, however, is fast no matter what resin you use, and you don't get quality loss in your prints because it uses PFA or NFEP, whatever you want to call it. And again, there are fewer settings to deal with and no air bubbles on the tops of prints anymore either. But to finish, let's have a look at a few of the extras that these printers have that the others don't. The Saturn has an AI camera. It's meant to detect failures, but this is limited to what is right in front of it on the plate. And whilst it does make time lapses, these are pretty crap in dark rooms. Even in light rooms, you get more of a silhouette than a pretty video of the print itself. Installing a light will mess up the AI function according to Elegoo, but I installed one anyway because I'd rather have a fully working time-lapse feature than a partially working AI feature. Both printers have Wi-Fi functionality, so you can remotely send and monitor prints. Anycubic has a cloud service, so to use this you need to create an account, sign in on the desktop application and sign the printer in, which you can do via the Anycubic companion app. To print models you need to upload them to the cloud and then on the printer tell them to print from your cloud account. But the bonus is here, by having an app on your phone, you also get progress notifications in the app itself. The Saturn's wireless function connects to Chitubox, and there you can send your file wirelessly to the printer, and you can tell it to print remotely too. You can also monitor progress from here, view the live camera, and download your time lapses. But there's no phone app for the Elegoo system, which is a bit of a shame. User interface wise, both printers mostly have the same functions and both are well laid out and well translated. One difference is that while both printers have the ability to do multiple exposure time tests in a single print, the RERF test from Anycubic is a bit convoluted in regard to how to get it working and is limited to exposure times with 2.5 second increments between them. The method Elegoo have added is a simple case of create a file with 4, 6 or 8 models on the platform, and then in the UI you can choose the exact exposure time for each. On the Saturn, the UI is now in portrait orientation rather than landscape, which, well, personally, I'm not a fan of. It makes some of the text far too small to read from a decent distance. The Anycubic UI is handy throughout. It's not going to make much of a massive difference, but it's just a bit of a step in the wrong direction, I think, from Elegoo that very few people are favourable of. So moving on, the M7 has a couple of extra features missing from the Saturn as well. One is a resin pump. As I've said, I hate these. They're messy. Every time you change them, you need to flush them out. All these do is use some metal prongs to monitor the resin level and pump more resin in during a print if it gets too low. But this will only work with any cubic shaped bottles because the cap with the pump tubes is made for that bottle shape and it needs to stay fully pressurized throughout the print with no air gaps in the system. Honestly, for a 10-inch printer, it's just so much easier to pour resin in and out manually, and just keep an eye on your bigger prints and then add more resin when needed, rather than have to deal with flushing these systems out for the minor convenience they add. I honestly wish the printer was cheaper and this was an optional accessory. Now, one thing where I need to correct myself, I did mistakenly say in my review of the M7 that the pump covers the vent hole, but it doesn't. The base of the pump has its own vents in too, which I noticed the day I put that video live. So yeah, facepalm moment for me there. The big feature of the M7, however, is its resin heater, because on the Elegoo this is a separate accessory and is more of a chamber heater than a resin heater. This M7 device is, well, as far as heaters go, it's strange. So first of all, this is bolted to the vat and you can't remove it. I know people with the M5 printers who like to have a vat with ACF and a vat with PFA on, but here it will cost you almost double for a second vat because this heater has to be built in. And the way it works is this heater sucks resin through a channel under the vat into a heater which heats it. It then goes down another channel and comes out of the opposite side of the vat. This heater automatically kicks in before a print starts to preheat the resin and continues pumping throughout the print. And despite the resin constantly flowing and moving, in my testing so far, I haven't seen any issue resulting from layer shifts or anything that suggests that this resin movement is having any negative impact on the prints themselves. But as far as heaters go, well, it just seems overly complex. I would have much preferred the simplicity of something like a vat heater, like we've seen on the Apex Maker X1 and the Hagear's Ultracraft Reflex. So we know they can be done. And I say simplicity because just like the resin pump, this is a pump, so when you do material changes, it's another system you need to flush out to avoid any cross-material contamination. But at least it has a heater. As I said before, the Saturn doesn't, but Elegoo are releasing one which basically attaches to the vent hole, and it's only a chamber heater. However, it seems to pump the hot air up and away from the resin rather than heat the resin itself. I guess it's better than nothing, but these plastic lids aren't exactly insulated covers on printers, so I would have much preferred to see both of these printers have something like a heated vat. But there you go guys, that's everything. And I guess with all of these differing features, you may be more confused now than before you started watching, so it's a good job I like to break things down to the main functional differences, all simple like, at the end of my videos. Forget all the ancillary shit like time-lapse cameras and resin pumps. They're fun features, but the thing you want this printer for is to print, right? It's the prints themselves that matter the most. In which case, I think it boils down to print quality, speed, and ease of use. So if you just consider the product out of the box, the Saturn wins on quality hands down, but you can swap the ACF for PFA on the M7 to match it, but that will slow down the M7 significantly. On speed, the Anycubic may be faster on paper, and it may be faster if you use fast resins, but with standard resin, it's slower. And again, if you swap the ACF to PFA, it's even slower still. The Saturn can be fast with a much wider variety of resins, and again, out of the box. And when it comes to ease of use, well, the M7 gives you more pump tubes to clean out, where the Saturn doesn't, and reduces the amount of print settings you need to mess around with at the same time. Yes, you've got that slight gap between the plates, and if that puts you off, fine. Like, I've seen a lot of people really put off by this vat design, and I expect Elegoo will definitely correct this in the next iteration of printers they release. But in all honesty, it's not that bad. So I guess the Saturn is the preferred one for me, but I guess all of its features are a moot point if you can't actually get your printer to the right temperature. If you get your resin below 20 degrees, you start having to overexpose layers, and that reduces the quality of prints, or you're going to struggle to get them to print well or print at all. So I guess unless you plan to put your Saturn in an insulated space, even if that's just a grow tent, and have a heater, they do have their own which will work up to 25 degrees, then the M7 may be the only option. Well, out of these two anyway. When you look at the M7's price, you aren't far off a GK2, which I can currently get you another $120 off when you use FauxHammer, all caps, as your discount code. I guess in summary, the Saturn certainly feels more like the innovation in printing this time around, and that's backed up with their consistency in the last few years. Just little things like adding the same vent hole with the same size and same placement for screw locations. This sort of minor thing solidifies consumer trust that buying an Elegoo is more of an investment. If, for example, you DIY an extractor hose for this machine, there's a good chance it'll work on your next Elegoo a couple or few years down the line. So I guess if you are at this point eyeing up the Saturn IV Ultra, as I said at the beginning, it's also worth checking out the differences in the normal Saturn IV. And even the Saturn III is much the same of that if it's still available, and could even be a lot cheaper. Anycubic has certainly stepped up their game this time around, but they just have been a bit more hit and miss historically, and maybe that puts you off. The M3 Premium was ace, but just not enough people bought it, and those that still have it can't even get parts anymore, like the screen, a consumable part. And that lack of sales probably led Anycubic to cheapen out when it came to the M5 series. Now they're back with the M7, which really is a great machine, but the method of integrating heating it leaves me scratching my head. And I can actually say I've said for years now that we've gone beyond print quality being fine and its ease of use features we need. A heater certainly adds to more consistent print success and may be crucial for some users where the printers are in cooler environments. Even in warmer climates, the temperature may drop to suboptimal overnight. But I just don't know if I can describe this method of heating as one that is easy to use. But it's still a great printer in its own right. So I do hope this has at least cleared things up for you somewhat, and I want to say thanks for watching to the end. If you do want to buy either machine and this video helped, please click our affiliate links in the description before your purchase, and check out the links to Loot Studios too, as they have some of the best models online to 3D print, in my humble opinion anyway. If you'd prefer facts over opinions, the fact is that the value of their monthly sub is incredible. Oh, and do you need me to do a video comparing these two printers to the Frozen Mighty Revo and the Hallett Mage S? I feel like those reviews speak for themselves, but if you want it, I'll do it. Let me know. Again, I want to say thanks for watching, and thanks to our members who get a ton of benefits, including their name in the credits, as you can see now. They get early access and exclusive videos along with member level roles in our Discord server. Until next time, get up, come on, get down with the sickness. FauxHammer out.